My name is Lewis, Lewis, Begley Culkin Jr. I was born at the Methodist Hospital in Omaha, Nebraska on March 8th, 1936. I grew up in several houses, which is going to take a whole explanation. But the first house where I lived when I was born was 4404 Wakely Street in Omaha, Nebraska. Then I lived at the 2050 50th Street in Omaha, Nebraska. Then I lived on what we called the farm, which I'll get into later. And then I lived at the duplex. I can't remember the address, but the duplex. And then we lived at 4219 Valley. My dad built a house there. And then we lived in Kansas. And then we lived back to Omaha. Then we lived at Sioux City, Iowa. Then we lived at Remsen, Iowa. Then back to Sioux City, Iowa. Then to Sheridan, Montana. Then I went to Wentworth Military Academy in Lexington, Missouri, so I'll cover that later. And I attended the University of South Dakota in Vermillion, South Dakota. And then I moved to California in 1956. This was during the Depression, so everything was rather poor and far in between. So anyway, we rented the farm. They called it the farm because it used to be, but anyway, my mom's parents, Grandpa and Grandma Peterson, my mom, my dad, myself, my cousin Sandy and her mother Winnie, and my uncle Pete. We all lived on the farm, and only two people had jobs. My dad had a job at the county paymaster's office. My uncle had a job as a runner for the Federal Reserve Bank in Omaha. The only other thing I remember was Esther. My Aunt Esther had married several times, and I think it was her second husband, ex-husband at the time, committed suicide in the car at the farm. My Aunt Esther Dalzell, my godmother, Louis Dalzell and his wife Esther Dalzell, my aunt, would bring, Aunt Esther would come out to the farm with the back seat loaded with groceries a couple times a week for us on the farm. And that's one of the ways we were able to eat, was Aunt Esther and Uncle Louis feeding us. It was good. I had a great mom and dad, good home life. It was a good life with my mom and dad. My dad was Lewis Begley Culkin Sr., and my mother was Ruth Peterson. My parents were born, my dad was Louis, they called him, Louie. He was born in Omaha, Nebraska, and my mother, Ruth Peterson Culkin, was born in Elk Creek, Nebraska. Well, he was very friendly, outgoing. He was a salesman. He sold Caterpillar tractors, and so he was very friendly and because of his relationship with customers and so forth. Uh, be honest and work hard, and that was it. My mother was a housewife and always had good food. Loved to eat steak. I played high school basketball at Sioux City Central High School in Sioux City, Iowa. And she'd always have the night of games. She'd always have because the game would be about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And she'd always have about 5 o'clock a nice big steak and potato and so forth. So she kept me well fed and was easy to talk to. I could share anything with my mom. In 1950 or 40, about 1946, she went to Mayo Brothers Hospital in Rochester, Minnesota. She wasn't feeling well, and she was going up there to get diagnosed with what was wrong with her. And I went to live with my mother's parents, Fred and Edith Peterson, in South Omaha at the projects. And I was there about 6 weeks, and they finally came back, and she had lymphosarcoma, cancer of the lymph nodes, and gave her about 3 years to live. But she made it all the way from 46 to 59. So she made it way past where they predicted that she'd die. And when I was in the Air Force overseas, it would be about December of 59, she passed away while I was there. But I got to come home on emergency leave. So rather than just come home for a funeral, I came home and was able to visit with her while she was still with us. My dad, both of them were kind of socialized, fraternity and sorority and all that kind of stuff. And so I think they met that way through the social network, if you will, of Omaha. Well, let's see. On my dad's side, his father was Patrick Joseph Culkin, and he was born in 1876 in Dromore West, County Sligo, Ireland. And then his wife was Jane Begley Culkin, and she was born in Omaha. And then my mother's side was, her father was Fred J. Peterson, and he was born in Tama, Iowa, in I think it was around 1886. And his wife was Edith Rowena Wagoner Peterson, and she was born in Pawnee City, Nebraska, in about 1882, I think it was. So that's my grandparents. My mother's father, Fred J. Peterson, he owned a construction company, and his dad was in the construction business, so he took over from his dad and the construction business and building highways, railroads, big things like that. Whereas Patrick Joseph Culkin was a clothing salesman. He sold clothing, men's clothing his whole life. And both grandmothers were housewives. There's a story that I should tell about my aunt and uncle, Louis Dalzell, and his wife, my aunt Esther. They were my godparents. And when I was born in Omaha, my Aunt Esther came to the hospital to visit me and my mom. And she walked in. I guess I was kind of chubby and everything. And she said, he looks just like a little stevedore. So the Steve name stuck with me on my mother's side. But on my dad's side, I was always known as Louie, Louie. So, and then there's another story that goes with Uncle Louie and the Rackets. And Uncle Louie was an independent businessman as a racketeer, whatever you call it. Anyway, his father owned a drugstore in South Omaha, and he took after his father. His father owned a pharmacy, and so Uncle Louie went to Creighton University and graduated and got a degree in pharmacology, I guess, pharmacy. And when his dad retired, he gave him the drugstore to run. And so Uncle Louie figured there'd got to be a better way to make money than selling pills one at a time. So he went into the rackets. And he went down, cleaned out the basement downstairs at the pharmacy, and created a gambling place, numbers and all that kind of stuff. And he had an old black man that was the janitor there. He stayed there and was a night watchman and so forth. And one night he's playing cards, and the old black gentleman comes down and says, "Louie, there's a phone call for you upstairs." And in those days, phones were just not that frequent, and they had a phone booth inside the drugstore up front. And so he said, "Louie, you got a call upstairs." So Uncle Louie said, "Just a minute, let me play this hand out." And so he did. He played the hand out, and as he was walking up the back stairs, somebody machine gunned the phone booth where he would have been had he not played that extra hand. So he knew who it was, and he took his .45, his gun, went over there and busted into this guy's place and passed the bodyguard and everything, stuck the gun in this guy's face and said, "You ever try that again, I'm going to blow your brains out." Well, now he didn't know if the guy would ever try again. So going to work is only 2 blocks up to the corner at the drugstore from the house where they lived. And every night, or morning rather, well, it'd be afternoon because his hours were, nighttime hours for gambling. And so my aunt would back the car down the driveway out to the front lawn. And then my Uncle Louie would come out with his gun in his hand, get in the car, and she'd drive him up to work at the drugstore or the gambling place. And he'd get out up there with his .45 and he'd go into work. So that was the same process at night going home. Well, Uncle Louie was an independent gambler, and he had a friend who was Frank Camerata, and he was a gambler and had a place over the other side of town from Uncle Louie. And the same night that they machine gunned my uncle's front part of the store, Frank Camerata, his store was hit. So basically, Uncle Louie had to go for a couple of months with the gun routine going to work. But then it seemed the guy that did that to the store was murdered. And I don't know this for sure, but my guess is that Frank Camerata, being a friend of Louis Dalzell's and they owned a couple of investments together, gambling places. And I think that Frank had this guy killed. So they had a big funeral and everything, and all the mob guys from town. And their Camerata, he was the head of the mafia in Omaha, and linked to Al Capone in Chicago through the Capone mob. That was the story about Uncle Louie and the machine gunning. There was a book that was published about the Omaha underworld, and I forget, I've got it here, but anyway, Uncle Louie never appeared in the book at all.
Did he ever have any problems with the mob bosses higher up because he was an independent and not part of?
No, he got along with everybody. He was not part of the mafia per se. He was independent of that part, but he never had any trouble with anybody else. And since I went through that book and read that book, I never could find Uncle Louie in the book. So he was kind of the background guy that never really came out front. The only link I could find was they said that Frank Camerata was invested in and owned the 75 Club, which was a gambling den just south of Omaha over in Sarpy County. And the reason I could link that to it is my grandfather, my mother's father, Louis Dalzell's father-in-law, had Grandpa Peterson as a night watchman and guard at the 75 Club. So that was the only link that I could make, was that Uncle Louie owned the club and he was partners with this guy, Frank Camerata. Even though Camerata was mafia, but Louie was an independent. So he got along with pretty much everybody, except the one guy was trying to take over the mob in South Omaha with the machine gunning. And Frank apparently took care of him a couple months later. Well, it was Sandy and her mother, and then Uncle Louie and Aunt Esther. And Uncle Louie had a friend named Cappy Simpson. His wife's name was Helen. And Helen Simpson ran the best cat house at Omaha, South Omaha, Nebraska. So she'd leave a dish out on the counter for customers coming in, all the farmers and cattlemen and ranchers would come in, and she'd leave a dish because they'd sell their cattle and they'd have lots of money. And so she'd leave a dish and they'd donate to Sandy for her school clothes and stuff. So Sandy'd go down to the cat house and she'd pick up the money, and Winnie, her mother, would get it, and she'd go buy all her clothes for, school and stuff like that. So anyway, that was that story. Well, the nicknames I had was Steve on my mother's side because of my aunt referring to me as a little stevedore. And that stuck on that side. And on my dad's side, it was Louie. Family traditions, I remember that mainly on the Culkin side, my grandma used to cook, and she'd bake cakes and also had Waldorf salads. But on my mother's side, it was pies instead of cakes, and it was lettuce and tomato salad instead of Waldorf salad. So that was two differences that I remember from that. Typical holiday, Christmas and Thanksgiving, and that would be turkey, mainly turkey. And we used to have big dinners at my Aunt Esther's in South Omaha, Uncle Louie and Aunt Esther's. And they'd have a number of guests. And one time they had a big Thanksgiving dinner. And there were a number of people that I didn't know that were invited to the dinner. And I remember Uncle Louie, after dinner, the men went in the den to smoke their cigars, stuff like that. And they left the door open just an inch or two so my cousin Sandy and I could peek in. And as we were peeking in, Uncle Louie was handing out envelopes to these men. And they had money in the envelope. So Uncle Louie was paying off the city council and all that kind of stuff. So that's what that was for. So personality as a child?
Yeah.
Well, I guess fun, outgoing, played a lot, you know. Yeah, Miss Wickstrom. She was like my 7th grade teacher at North Junior High School. And she was a very good teacher, and I learned a lot from Miss Wickstrom. She taught geography, so geography is one of my favorite subjects. So they say never play Jeopardy with me on geography because you won't win. But then there was another teacher. When I was in 5th grade, I had gone through we lived in Remsen, Iowa, while my mother was getting diagnosed up at the Mayo Brothers. And I hadn't been in a Catholic school or that. We were Catholic. So I went to 5th grade for the first time in Catholic school. And had a nice, I had fun at school. And I had a good teacher, and I got A's and B's. And then in 6th grade, we went in this old, crotchety, mean old teacher, nun. And so I got my report card. Instead of A's and B's, they were C's and D's. So when I got that report card, I stood up and started walking out of the classroom. She says, "Where are you going?" "Sit down." I said, "I'm going to the school across the street." So I walked over to the public school and in the 6th grade. And they said, "Well, does your mother know?" And I said, "No." And she said, we better call her. So she called my mother, and my mother said, "Whatever he wants to do." So I transferred myself over to the 6th grade in Remsen, Iowa. Not really, other than disobeying the nun and going across the street. But I never really got in trouble in school. First job, I worked at a Coca-Cola bottling plant because my neighbor next door owned a car dealership, and their friend in the beverage business. So I got a job working there at the beverage place, filling bottles and capping them and, you know, all that kind of stuff associated with pop. Oh yeah, another job I had was one of the first ones was I mowed greens at a golf course, Sunset Hills Golf Course in Sioux City. I lasted there maybe a week, and that was it with that. Terry Thompson, Thomson, and we lived next door to each other, and we had a basketball hoop up on our garage, and we used to shoot baskets and play basketball. We played high school basketball together, and so we were pretty close. And I went down to University of Iowa because Terry was in a fraternity at the University of Iowa. And we went down there to see a basketball game, and so we did that and other things we do together. And I saw him probably 10 years ago. He lived in Denver, Colorado, so Marianne and I stopped and visited he and his wife in Denver. So he's been in my life most of the years. Yes, I did. I went in the 9th grade. I went to 9, 10, and 11th grades. I went to Wentworth Military Academy in Lexington, Missouri. And I worked my way up. In my 3rd year, I was first sergeant of C Company. And also I played football, basketball, and ran track. And I was surprised at the graduation ceremony that I won the 1953 Best All-Around High School Athlete for Wentworth. So that was an award that I was proud of. It hangs on the wall in my office. I like jazz, so I listen to a lot of jazz and stuff.
Who was your favorite artist?
I remember they had this group that was a jazz group, Lester Young on a saxophone and trumpet. I don't know, a bunch of guys, so I listened to them. Yeah. I first started dating. There was a gal named Carla Ashman at Sioux City Central. And actually we were in junior high at that time. And so we dated for maybe 6 months and then went off other places. Well, with Wentworth, it was pretty straight-laced. So I guess it was just down straight and narrow.
And I saw somewhere, did you go to a military academy?
Yes.
What was life like that? And how old were you then? And what was that like?
Well, let's see. I was, it was 1950, and I went to Wentworth. That was start of the freshman year. And I went there for 3 years, and the life was very regimented. And the only thing that helped me get through it, I think one of the things was the fact that I played athletics. So we got to leave the campus go for football games and basketball. I was the captain of the basketball team my sophomore year. Yeah, junior year, I'm sorry. Other than that, it was just put the nose to the grindstone, and it was out for like football. I went out as a freshman. Didn't really start. I was on the team, but I didn't really start or anything. And then my sophomore year, I made the first string football team, first string basketball, and ran track and field. I did the mile relay and also ran low hurdles and high hurdles. And something to be proud of there was on the mile relay at the state meet in Missouri. I was a starter on the relay team, mile relay team. And at the 2:20, at the halfway point, I had run faster than the 220 that won the state. So for the first half of the mile relay, you run one half, you can time it. And the time I had run was like a second faster than the 220 time that won the state meet. So they looked at the thing and said, my God, these guys have run faster than the state meet for the 220. So it was interesting. But that was about it. And then I graduated there and I went back home to Sioux City, Iowa. I had a girlfriend, Jana Cotton. And so I went to Sioux City Central, and then from there I went to, that was my senior year, and I graduated, and then I went to University of South Dakota in Vermillion, 2 years, and then I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I dropped out and figured out it wasn't for me. So I started looking for a job, and there just weren't any jobs available in Sioux City. I mean, I worked for a week plucking chicken lungs with my bare fingers, and you'd go home at night and your fingers would be raw. So that wasn't good. So anyway, my mother called her brother, my uncle in California, Uncle Pete. And she said, he's looking for a job. He said, oh, have him come out here. He can stay with me till he gets on his feet. So my mother and I drove out to California, and that was 1956. And I got here on one day, and the Douglas Employment Office was right next door in the parking lot, next to where my uncle and I lived. And I got a job at Douglas Aircraft. I was a plastics laminator. And I helped build the first radome, the nose part of the mock-up, for the DC-8 mock-up, which was the first DC-8 ever. So did that. Then we had a guy that didn't really know much about the job or anything, but he'd been there longer than this other guy who had less time there, but that guy knew everything and ran did everything. And I thought, well, this isn't going to be, and they promoted the dumb guy and left the smart guy, so I said, I don't think this is going to work out for a career where you just put in your time and you get promoted. So I left there and I went looking for a job, and I found a lineman and installers, General Telephone, Santa Monica. So I went down and applied, and they said we wanted experienced linemen and installers. And I said, well, your ad didn't say that. It just said linemen and installers. She said, have you got any schooling? I said, yeah, I got 2 years of college. Oh, what'd you major in? She had a engineering assistant's job open. So she said, what'd you major in? I said, engineering. So anyway, I took the test and scored the highest of all the guys that took the test. So that I got an interview that afternoon, and I was hired right away. And I went to work at General Telephone in Santa Monica, California. And then I was in the days of the draft, so the draft was getting close. So I started looking around, and my buddy, Pierre Kelly, he had a friend, and they were still in Sioux City, and Pierre called me and said, well, get ready to get drafted, because this guy's friend was just older than he was, and he just got drafted. And he said, 2 weeks after that, I'm going to get drafted, and 2 weeks after that, you're going to get drafted. So I started looking and found that either I'm going to Wentworth as an Army ROTC, so as a ground pounder unit, and I didn't want to do that. So the Army was out. The Marine Corps is, forget it. you're the first one in and the first one dead. And so it was either the Navy or the Air Force. So I saw Strategic Air Command with Jimmy Stewart and June Allison. And it was a SAC, the Strategic Air Command. So I thought, well, I'll go Air Force. So I joined the Air Force and went through all of that stuff in the military. And the first 28 weeks was in training in schools and stuff. And then I graduated, got promoted, going through school and passing everything. And I got promoted and came out of there and went overseas. They sent me to Trabzon, Turkey. And I spent 12 months there, a year, as a remote isolated tour of just a year. And then I came back from there. And while I was there, I'd been there 4 months, and on September 2nd, 1959, one of our aircraft, a C-130 Hercules, was shot down over Russia, and 19 guys died. But it's interesting, because I know exactly what happened because I was on the airborne position that day. And the official, like you read it today, it says that all 19 died in the crash. They didn't. And the reason I know that is because the pilots of the MiGs that were shooting them down were talking to their ground controller in Russia, who said that the back ramp is coming down, and there's one parachute, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parachutes went out the back. So not everybody died in that shoot down. What I think happened is they were captured, tortured, and interrogated, and then they were killed, maimed badly, and then given back to the Americans. So I think that's the true story there. Anyway, I got out of there and I came back to San Angelo, Texas, Goodfellow Air Force Base. And I was supposed to be going in and starting up an advanced electronic countermeasure school, my specialty. And they canceled the school. So now what do they do with me? So we'd heard stories about guys coming back from overseas, because all of our work was espionage or electronics spying. Were overseas. There was none of that work was here in the States. So we'd heard the story about being air cops and stuff like that. So they said, well, we got an air police position open, policeman position. I said, I don't want to be an air cop. And so they said, can you swim? And I said, yeah, I can swim. So they said, well, go down and see Sergeant Spencer down at the Airman's Pool. And I went down there, saw him, and he says, go in and put a suit on and give me a few laps. And I did. And he said, you'll do. So I ended up a lifeguard at the Airman's Pool in San Angelo, Texas, and then later at the Officers Club. And that was great, because physical conditioning specialist, lifeguard. And then when the pools closed for the winter, I went inside and was a clerk typist. And then when the pools were going to open up the next year, I was going to be in charge of all the pools on the base, 2 pools, the Officers Club and the Airmen's Club. But I was working at my job there in the office, clerk typist, and they had a board with the listing of the primary AFC and second, all that stuff, Air Force Specialty Code. And so there's my primary Air Force Specialty Code was 303 50 ECM specialist. And then also second was physical conditioning specialist. That was a lifeguard. And then there was another AFSC because I was a clerk typist. So this lady came through. I don't know what she was a biggie in the Air Force headquarters in Texas. And she comes in one day and she looks up at the board. And the electronics end of me was critical in the Air Force. So, and here I was sitting there, clerk typist. I did 2 reports, about a paragraph each a week. So she came into Coates' office, my sergeant, says, "Culkin, where's Culkin?" Coates says, "He's in the other room, next to the major, taking care of the major." And so she said, comes in and says, "Culkin, what are you doing here in this job?" And I said, "Look, lady, I just do what I'm told and go where I'm told. I had no choice in this." So she took my name and serial number, and I'd already declared that I was going to get out of the Air Force. And if you were getting out, they wouldn't do nothing for you. They wouldn't promote you. They wouldn't transfer you. They just let you sit until you finish your tour, and then you discharge you. So anyway, I was permanent party on the base, which means you're in on the base. You know people because you work with people. And so I called Sergeant King over at Wing Headquarters, and he said, "Well, you said you're getting out, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah." And I still had 18 months to go. And so he said, "And then you won't fill the paperwork out correctly. Well, I'll have to recycle that several times, and that ought to move us up to here." Everything. So the next day he calls back and he says, "I don't know who the hell she is, but she's already got your transfer in for the headquarters, the SAC, Strategic Air Command." So that was that. The only thing I got to delay was my son was going to be born in February, and so the doctor didn't want her to travel until April 1st. And April 1st, I headed out in the Chevy convertible, loaded it with the back loaded, and drove to Omaha, Nebraska, and was at SAC headquarters. I walked in there and I looked at all these guys, and they were all the same guys that I'd gone through basic training and stuff, or ECM training with. So anyway, then I got there, and my grandfather, Patrick Joseph Culkin, on the Culkin side, I got there the 3rd of April, and he died the 23rd of April. So I was there for the funeral. But so anyway, I finished up there and got discharged and went back to the phone company because while I was in the military, I had a military leave of absence from General Telephone, so they had to give me a job when I got back. So that worked out, and I ended up a director at the phone company. So that worked out well. Well, I was transferred from San Angelo, Texas, from security service, which security service is all the communications stuff. For example, in Trabzon, we monitored Russian radar, airborne stuff, and ground radar, and then we'd send it back to the States for analysis. Also, we monitored the Soviet missile launches. We were, I think it's the Georgian mountains was north of us, across the Black Sea, in Trabzon. And so there, RBM, intermediate range ballistic missile, was launched from Kapustin Yar, and then their ICBMs were launched from Turatam in Kazakhstan. And so the Georgian mountains were just north of us, so we couldn't pick the missiles up until they cleared the horizon. So once they cleared the mountains, then they were transmitting telemetry and all that kind of stuff relative to the missile. And then we had a Peshawar, Pakistan was a site, and the next one down was Wakkanai, Japan. So we would monitor the missiles launched, the IRBMs, intermediate range missiles, and they'd usually crash further downrange in Kazakhstan. But the ICBMs would come into North Pacific, and then the outfit I was with was that was monitored through security service. And then when I got to the 544th Reconnaissance Technical Group at SAC, we received all of the output from all these ground stations and all the missile stuff. And so we get the readout on that, and we had RC-135 was our aircraft. We were RB-47s, and then that was phasing out, and we were going to RC-135s, which is a 4-engine jet. And I even saw them today. In today's world, I was watching some stuff going on, and there it was, the RC-135, and it was getting shot at over Kazakhstan or somewhere, I don't know where it was. But anyway, we get all that data and put that together and analyze it. And we had several specialty aircraft for the North Pacific where the ICBMs were coming in. And we had one aircraft had the whole right side of it was windows. And what they'd do is when the missile was coming in, it'd start to divide because there were multiple warhead units coming in, and they would divide up, and of course we'd be on the photography airborne shooting pictures of the missile as they were splitting off going to different targets. And then another case we had, Russia was going to set off La Bomba, the largest nuclear weapon ever exploded. And so we sent our RC-135 to monitor that. So he's flying parallel to where the bomb's going to drop. There's an island they dropped it on, just obliterated the whole island. And we were so close, and it was so hot that we burned the skin of the aircraft, was how close we were to that explosion. And let's see, in Trabzon, we lived on local economy. There's no base per se, but we lived on local economy and rented houses from the local Turks and so forth. And several episodes, like one night we had turkeys flown in. I think it was for Thanksgiving or Christmas, one of those holidays. And our houseboy had set it out in the sink to thaw, and a cat had come in the window and had eaten half of the breast out of the turkey. And I was so teed off at that I was sitting, my room was here, and across this hall was another room. And I heard cat paws, and I looked, and he came down, and he went into the room across the way. And I picked up Johnson. He had a 30-30. And I picked that up and aimed right at the tail hole of that cat and fired a shot right through it. It just blasted him all over the wall. So that was my revenge on the cat that ate our Thanksgiving turkey or whatever it was. And another one, we had neighbors across the street, locals, and they had kids. And they used to have. We had this one little kid. He's only 3 or 4 years old, but we called him the little idiot because he one day here he is with his sister, and he's got a hammer and he's beating on his sister with his hammer. So the little idiot. So one day a crow came in and they sat in our backyard, and Johnson opened the window. It had these swinging windows like this, and he opened it part way and just enough that he could get the barrel through the window, and it shoots this crow, and the feathers flew, this flying around, flopping around, and it flew over toward the little idiot's house and dropped in their courtyard. So in about 2 minutes, here comes the little idiot with this crow and drops him out in the street. So there were a few incidents like that. Oh, and then another one. We were a remote isolated tour, and we worked three days, 3 mids, and 3 night shifts, and then 3 days off. And so we were taken off, and we took the 6-5. We called it the Blue Goon. It was painted blue and didn't have any windows in it because the Turk kids threw rocks at you and busted all the windows out. So we went up the coast a way to go swimming and on the beach, and we were messing around up there. And coming back, we've been drinking, and we were pretty well blitzed. And anyway, we're coming down this hill, and the 6-5's got a governor on it, so it can only go about 50 miles an hour. But we kicked it into neutral, so we were coming down the hill in Turkey on the Black Sea. As you're going along, you go into a valley, and then you climb out up a mountain, then you go down into a valley, and so forth. And so 2 guys were sitting up on the top of the 6-5, and the rest of us were in the back, and a couple of guys up front driving and that. So he kicked it into neutral. Well, that took the governor off, and away we went. So we must have been going 60 miles an hour, and this buffalo wandered up on the road and we hit the buffalo. And luckily we hit him hard enough, and with we had a big winch on the bumper, and it hit high enough up, it just threw the buffalo right up over the top, just missed the 2 guys sitting on top of the cab. Well, now, anything that ever happened when the Americans were out anywhere, the Turks would always blame the Americans. So this time we decided we're not going to fess up to it. So anyway, they never did find out who hit the buffalo. but what they did is the Air Force said, okay, no more local drivers, us, the airmen, no more Air Force drivers. And they hired local Turk drivers. And so anyway, it was rather scary because going up the hill, we had to run back and forth, going up the mountain to go up the top of the Boz Tepe, which is a big mountain. And several times they'd have to pull up, back down, pull up, and then go around the corner and go up because it was so steep. And a couple of times the local Turk driver got it in neutral and started rolling back toward the cliff, and we said, oh shit, So we got out of there real quick. But anyway, so the local Turks started driving. Well, they drive the 6x, the Blue Goose, down through town and go out to the west end, and then they cut across, and the highway went this way on that side of it, and then a couple of blocks, they'd go east. Well, the Turks would take all of our pop cans and beer cans, the aluminum ones and metal ones, and they'd flatten them out, weld them together, and make roofs out of them. So there's this one corner there where the 6x had to turn the corner to make it from Eden to go east and start up the hill. And there was this tea shop on the corner. And every morning there'd be the local Turks would be in there getting their sinbit, their round cinnamon type roll, and their chai, their tea. Well, here comes this local driver driving us in the 6x. And as he turns the corner, he hooks the 6x on the edge of the roof. And the whole roof was made out of welded metal cans all together and flat. And instead of backing up and getting around it, he just put it low and pulled forward, and the whole roof came down in the tea shop. And the local Turks were coming out all dust and dirt flying and coughing and everything. So they didn't have any trouble with the Turks. He just drove on. So that worked as far as that went. Yes, one day I worked in maintenance for a while, and I had to do some work on an antenna, and we had trees, and then the antennas would stick up above the trees. And so one day I was out, and I had to go up and do some maintenance on an antenna, and I look out north over across the Black Sea, and I see two black contrails, two jets coming at us. And one of them turned and went east and then back north and headed back to Russia. The other one turned to the right and went out and was over Akhchabat, which is the next town down. And then he banked around, and he was coming straight for our site. And he was so close, I swear I could feel the jet warmth going over me. But anyway, I'm up on the top giving him this bit. So somewhere in Soviet Russia, there's a picture of me probably giving him the sign. Well, my mom was dying, and I got emergency leave to come home in October. And I was lucky enough, I got Turk Cavalieri, and I got down to Ankara, or no, actually Istanbul. And I got to Istanbul, so I went out to the main site, which is our base there, our main headquarters base in Turkey, just south of Istanbul on Yalova Sea. Anyway, I got there at about 1 o'clock, and the group Goonie, the C-47, was going to go to Tripoli, Libya, which was exactly where I was trying to get to. So I said, hey, can I hook? And they said, sure, because they had a C-47 there mainly to keep the hours up on the pilots, because they had to fly so many hours to get their pilot pay. And so anyway, I got on the group Goonie, and we left about 1, but we had to fly into Istanbul to clear Turkish customs and all that. And so we cleared, and we were at Istanbul at the airport, and we taxied out, and we're taxiing on the taxiway up to the main runway, and I could see out the window there was a Lufthansa, Lockheed C-1, well, it was a Lockheed Constellation was the name of it, but in the Air Force it was a C-121. Anyway, so we taxied up and we taxied out on the runway, and this guy's going to land there, this German plane, big one. And there was this young lieutenant, I think he was his first lieutenant maybe. Anyway, I said to him, I said, Lieutenant, there's a Lufthansa Constellation on final coming right at us. And smart ass guy. And he says, don't worry, Airman, everything's okay. And about that time, I'm sure the Lufthansa pilot is going to say, I'm going to show these U.S. Air Force people. He came over the top, and I looked up the front window, and he just cleared maybe 10 feet above our plane sitting there. And those things scream when they're coming into land. The air's going through the brakes and the flaps and all that. And this lieutenant, he had a cup of coffee. He jumped up, hit the ceiling, and spilled the coffee all over. I said, see, I told you, Lieutenant. I was trying to tell you. He says, oh. So anyway, we flew from there to Athens, and we landed in Athens, and got something to eat, and then we were starting up to taxi out, and the right engine was missing. So we had to taxi back in, and the crew chief had to change the plugs because it was out of moisture. It condensed well. We come down hot, cylinders and land, and let it sit, and the moisture got into the plugs. So he got those changed, and meantime, there's a storm that was moving from west to east in the Mediterranean. And our original flight path, we would have gone south or missed it on the east side. But because we were late getting out, the storm moved faster than we thought. When we took off and got up there, we flew right into the middle of the storm. And I'm telling you, we were bouncing all over the place up there. And it was getting kind of scary. Then they came back and said, you better put your parachutes on. And I thought, oh, it's even worse. And the engine started missing again. And we tried to climb over it, couldn't get over it. Tried to go under it, couldn't do it. Suddenly, we just popped out on the south edge of that storm, and we were out over calm, banked around and headed to Tripoli. And General Lackey was on the plane. He was our general in charge of our area. So he saw me and says, where are you headed? And I told him about my mom dying. So I'm sorry to hear that. So when we came into land in Tripoli, there was a Jeep came out looking for Culkin. And he had radioed ahead to have there's a C-124 heading for the States. Just engines were idling when the Jeep pulled up. They threw my stuff in, and I got in, and away we went. So thank you, General Lackey. But anyway, that was scary. I mean, when they tell you come back and put your parachutes on, and then the waves would probably be so big, hitting them would be like flying into the side of a brick building. But anyway, we made it through it. Then I got on Old Shaky. The C-124 was called Old Shaky because the engines rattled and the fuselage rattled. It was just a shaky old thing. And we went to Torrejon, Spain, landed there and fueled. And then we left there. We're going to Kindley Air Force Base, Bermuda. Got just over the halfway point, and we lost an engine, so we had to divert and land in Kindley. And then I got a C-130 out of there to Charleston Air Force Base, and then took the bus. I think I flew into Omaha because my mom was staying with her sister, my Aunt Esther, in South Omaha at her house, along with their mother, Grandma Peterson. So I got 30 days at home, and then I flew back and got back, and I think I got back around the 1st of December, and about the 15th of December, my mom died. So I did get home and get to see her. And we've got a picture of my grandmother, my mother, me, Tricia, and Dee Dee. So 5 generations. So anyway, Tricia was my first wife. This is my second wife, Mary Ann. But Tricia was my first wife. We were married for, I think it's 21 years, and then divorced. She just passed away the 24th of August. Well, the first one, I was in Turkey when she was born in Santa Monica. My ex-wife's mother, my mother-in-law lived in West LA. So when I was overseas, she stayed with her mother. And so, matter of fact, she had Dee Dee October 18th, and she and Dee Dee flew back. So I got to see my daughter when she was 2 weeks old, as I first saw her.
Flew back to Omaha.
Yeah, it was in Omaha because everybody was at Esther's house. My mother, my grandmother, my dad had driven back from Montana. So that was that one. And then the second one, my son, he was born in San Angelo, Texas. And I was at work when she called from the hospital. So I went in and got to hold him and everything. And then the third one was Jana. She was born in Culver City, California. So I was there for that. So I was able to hold her and everything. So my first wife and I, we were trying to figure out a unique name for our youngest daughter. And anyway, of course, my girlfriend back in Sioux City was Jana. And so she said, that's a unique name. I says, look, if you name her Jana, it's on you, it's not on me. So she said, okay, yeah. So we named her Jana after my ex-girlfriend from Sioux City. Trying to keep kids from getting in trouble. I was pretty straight and narrow because I went to military school and you just do things this way and that way. But, my son was always on the edge of getting in serious trouble. And Dee Dee was okay, and Jana was kind of the wild one. She didn't know what she wanted to do, and then we came back to California, and then she dropped out of high school, so later got her GED, but she finally graduated. But they've been fairly successful. It's one thing, I've taught them to work hard, because my son was mowing lawns when he was 8 or 9 years old, making money. And the girls, Jana ended up in escrow. She was an escrow officer in Canoga Park, that area, San Fernando Valley. And then Dee Dee had taken, she graduated high school, and I think she ended up working for a law firm while she was going to college in Connecticut, in New Haven. And then when we transferred out here to California, she went to work for this attorney, ended up running his office. And at one point, she said, I need a raise, and he says, I can't give you a raise. So anyway, she'd been out shopping and found a down in Century City, where the big money lawyers are. And So she quit and went to work for this attorneys, and she was there about 6 weeks, and suddenly she gets a phone call from the old attorney. Says, "Come back, please come back, please," because she ran the office, and without her there, nothing really got done. So anyway, she worked there for him after that. I don't know. We came back in the 70s, so that must have been 73, 74, up until she retired just a year ago. Was it a year? Yeah. So anyway, she spent her whole career there, retired, and had worked hard, saved her money, had enough for retirement. She was pretty entrepreneurial. For example, she attended this class on this guy who teaches you how to buy houses, fix them up, and rent them. And you just keep buying and renting them out. He said, "Well, here's what you do," and he taught him all that stuff. And then at the last bit, he says, "How many are you going to do with this?" And Dee Dee's hand went up, and one other, only 2 of them. So she had houses in Florida, Texas, Tennessee, Washington. I mean, she had 10 houses. And then when she got ready to retire, a couple of them were paid off through renting them. And that's the guy's theory, was you pay them off, then when you retire, you live off the rent that's paid. So anyway, she got that all done. And then toward the end there, when she found out she was going to die, she sold off almost all of them except 2. I think they still got 2. They had a condo that they rented in the West Valley years ago, and the house that they live in. So they've only got 2 left. Dee Dee is my oldest daughter, and she was born while I was in Turkey. And we came back, and I worked as an engineering assistant out of Santa Monica, California for General Telephone. And so we moved. I got promoted from hourly to management. We moved to Downey, southern area. And then about a year after that, 2 years I think, I got promoted and transferred back to Santa Monica. And then I got promoted and transferred to Tampa, Florida, in the data processing end of the business as a user representative for data processing systems we were working on. And then I got that done and implemented, and then we moved to Fairfield, Connecticut. And she graduated from high school there at Ludlow, went to Catholic grade school. All of them went up through the 8th grade in Catholic schools, and then transferred to high school and public schools. So she went to that, and then we came back here. Eventually, we left there and moved to Canoga Park. And then we were there, and she got married then, and working on it, married an attorney. And she's got 3 kids. One of them lives in Columbia. One of them's in San Antonio, Texas. And the other one is in Thousand Oaks. So that was that. That was her family. She's a runner. She started running. She had good friends. Her husband worked in the heating and air conditioning business, and there's this other guy that worked there, and they were the best of friends. And so the friend and his wife had 2 girls, and one of them ended up getting cancer, and Dee Dee was really close to her. And she used to go down to UCLA to donate blood to get platelets for for the daughter. And at 17, the daughter died. And so Dee Dee, that got her started into running and what's the lymphoma society. They got running things all over, marathons all over the place. So she ended up doing that, and we wheeled her in her wheelchair in her 800th half marathon. And she had 300 full marathons. And she's run in every state in the Union. Even ran a marathon in Antarctica. So she's been all over the world. And anyway, one day I get a phone call from her. This was like June of last year. And she said, I've got this numbness in my fingers, on my left hand, and in my face. And I said, uh-oh, that sounds, because that's exact symptoms I had with my stroke. And so we was getting ready to go to the doctor. And so I said, well, that sounds like my stroke, so maybe that's it, I don't know. So anyway, she went to the doctor, came home, called me, and she says, I have brain cancer. And that's a real killer. So anyway, but she's handled it very well. She's had a lot. She has so many friends from her running days. I mean, she's got people flying in to visit her from, New York, Chicago, Florida, Denver, all over. They come in. And every time we stop by to visit at the house up there, it's loaded with her friends. So, but anyway, it just must be getting down toward the end, because in June of last year, they gave her a year to live. So June of this year, she passed a year. July, August, September. So 15 months she's gone. So, but that's tough when you see your own child going to go before you go. And of course, they just fixed me up with my heart and everything. I'll probably be around another 15, 20 years. That's something I could talk about, my operations.
No.
Huh? Well, I've had five heart procedures, I'll call them. First one was to go in, and they go up through the groin and into the heart to check it out to make sure that you're okay for heart surgery. So that's one heart process. The next one was to go in and replace the bovine aortic valve replacement. And then the next one was put in a pacemaker. And then the next one was the Watchman. And the next one was, it was a procedure for the throat, but they went in through.
Esophageal.
Yeah, esophageal. They went in through there and could examine the exterior of the heart where this Watchman is. It's healing good. So that's 5 surgeries and procedures relative to the heart. So, and they're trying to get me off of Eliquis. They did that. Last time they checked, they dropped me off of Eliquis, which is a pretty heavy blood thinner and so forth. But and they put me on Plavix, which is another blood thinner, but less powerful and as the other one.
And the idea is to get off of it.
Yeah, and by putting the Watchman in, there's an area of the heart just like on the exterior, and that's where blood clots tend to collect. So the Watchman is a little plastic device that they insert on the exterior of the heart, I believe, around that little pocket, they say. And then that's supposed to fill in with skin and and tissue. And once that's done, then next January, I'll be able to get off Plavix and just go to single baby aspirin a day. When they took me off of the, what's that? Eliquis. When they took me off of Eliquis, they put me on Plavix and a baby aspirin a day. And I'll stay on the Plavix till January, and then it should be set enough that I can just go on baby aspirin. So, and I can get off all these blood thinners that do all this stuff to you. We met.
That's a good story.
Yeah, let's see. We returned in 1978 from Connecticut to California, and we had been here a while, and we're having an open house, a party. And so Mary Ann and Leonard, her husband, attended the party. But before that, we'd been to a telephone club dinner, and my ex and Leonard, her ex, started talking, got acquainted, and they said, and this gas was a big shortage, not enough gas and costly. So between my ex and her ex, they said, why don't Mary Ann and Lou start carpooling? So anyway, we I guess some time went by, and Leonard said, have you talked to Lou Culkin about carpooling? And she said, I'm not going to go into a director's office and ask about carpooling. But anyway, about 3 days later, I said, hey, I've looked this carpooling, I found another one, Jim. So there's 3 of us that we could carpool. And so anyway, that's what we started doing. And then later on, she left Leonard because she left him. And we ended up getting together later on. And
After you left Patricia.
And I left Patricia. And then we got together. And then we were together 10 years. And then we got married in 90. Because I was divorced in 80. Got to 90 and then got married at 90. And so that's been, 40 some years ago? 44 years. Oh, yeah, we're in a hot tub. We're in the hot tub, and we were talking about going to Bullhead City we had a mobile home in Bullhead City. And so anyway, we were getting ready to go up there, and I said, well, we'll go through Vegas. And she said, what do you want to go through Vegas for? And I said, well, to get a marriage license. They don't have them except in Vegas, in that county, Clark County. She says, is this a proposal? And I said, it's as close as you're going to get. So we went through Vegas, and a buddy of mine, best friend, Dwayne, and his wife, Kayleen, and then another couple, Bob and Janice Kane. So Dwayne was my best man, and Janice Kane was her maid of honor. So we got married in Laughlin on the 16th green of the Emerald River Golf Course.
And they wrote us up in.
Oh yeah, and so when we called to try and set up an appointment there's only one judge there, Billy Mommee, Mommee. And so she was calling the office to try and arrange a time for him to marry us. And she called and was talking to the lady, and she said, well, there's several places that he won't marry, and that's a casino, or the boats that go up and down, and stuff associated with gambling. And Marianne said, well, would he accept the golf course? And she says, I think he might. So she checked with him. He says, sure, I'll marry him on the golf course because it's outside and away from gambling and all the stuff. And so we got married on the 16th green, which had a lake, waterfall, really nice, you know, and the river flowing by right there. Oh, they wrote us up because they didn't know what to do, where to write us up, you know. So they wrote us up because the golf course was really great. They had a big limousine, you know, like a golf cart limousine type thing. And so Billy Mommy was in it, and you and me and Dwayne and Kate and Janice. So anyway, he did it, married us on the 16th green. They wrote us up in the sports section because it was a golf course. So they didn't know where to put it, I guess, for marriage or whatever. But they wrote it up and it was in the green, the sports section. Probably the one that really sticks out is we've been on several wonderful trips. And the one, I think the best one was we went to Australia. And we have to thank Aunt Eileen because her Aunt Eileen died and left money to her siblings and kids. And so we ended up getting a nice chunk of money there. So we said, well, first we paid our car off. And then second was the house. Remodeled the house. And then we were thinking about taking a vacation, so I said, let's go to Australia and go first class all the way. She said, okay. So she started calling, because I had a bunch of frequent flyer miles from when I worked. And so anyway, she called and tried to get on the LA has a Qantas flight nonstop from LA to Sydney. And we were flying frequent flyer miles, and they don't have a lot of frequent flyer seats on these planes. And so anyway, nothing, couldn't get anything there. So she called, and there was a flight from Dallas nonstop to Sydney. At the time, it was the longest nonstop flight in the world. So they said, yeah, we got seats. So she said, she booked 2 in business class. And it was on one of those big A380s, I think it is. That's like double decker. Yeah, the big job. So anyway, we started getting ready, and we called our travel agent we have here. And she's more into cruises and stuff like that. But we had a special itinerary that we wanted to do ourselves. And so she was having a little trouble there. So she knew a gal that was an expert in Australia, New Zealand, up in LA, a travel agent. She got a hold of her, and we got in touch. And she laid out just exactly what we want, where we wanted to go. 42 days. And so we got on American here, backhauled to Dallas, got on in Dallas, went nonstop to Sydney, 17 hours. And then we cleared customs coming into Australia. And then we were going to go out on Qantas to New Zealand. So we came in, cleared Australian customs, and then we had to go across and clear New Zealand customs. And anyway, we had a great trip, took it over there, and then we went down to the Milford Sound, which is like Norway Sound, you know, like Norway's has these big, deep crevasses and sounds. And so anyway, we took a bus down there, and we were going to go out on this catamaran overnight, cruising in the Sound. Well, we got out cruising, everything was great, and we came in, and they anchor just outside of where you're going to finish at the pier, and it's a huge catamaran. I think it held something like 50 people. And anyway, while we were tied up there that night, they come in and said, well, we can't leave tomorrow. We can't get out because we came, as you come into the valley there where this airport, there's an airport there, but we didn't fly. We went bus. As you come through a tunnel, above that tunnel, they had an avalanche and it slid down and it blocked the tunnel. So they were going to take several days to dig the tunnel out, I guess, and get it going. But they said if you want to fly out, you have to pay your own. But, and we were falling behind because we had stuff, everything was scheduled for us, the whole trip. And so we started missing some of the features that we were supposed to do. So anyway, we said, yeah, we'll do that. So we flew out of there and then got us to Queenstown. And then we had to get from Queenstown to Sydney and then down to Tasmania. And we couldn't get out of Queenstown because the winds were too high and they couldn't land or take off. So anyway, they spent the night. They paid, the airline paid for the hotel and eats and stuff, so that no problem. But we missed one of our jet. We were going to take a jet boat, which goes up a river there. That's really exciting and fun. But we missed that, and luckily we had purchased travel insurance, and so we didn't lose any money. We got a couple. We missed another one because of this on the front end getting going, finally catching up where we should be. And so anyway, we got all that money back when we got it back. We applied. But anyway, we went from there to Tasmania. And in Tasmania, it was a great trip on a yellow boat. If anybody ever gets to Australia, or Tasmania, you gotta take the yellow boat. And it's one of these big, like, you see them, they're like a raft. They've got a front end and rigid sides and that. But anyway, we were taxiing out from where we were leaving from, and they come around and they say, here's seasick pills. So we thought, this is smooth and everything. And they're handing out rain slicks. And we're thinking, this is smooth and nice. So anyway, we cruised on up and cruised in the caves and all kinds of stuff, seeing wild and big stacks of mountains, coming vertically out of the ocean. And then we finally reached the far north, and we turned around and started headed back south to where we were going to go back to the starting place. And there's a point where the Southern Sea meets the Tasmanian Sea. And we hit that point, and it went from kind of fairly to just huge waves. I mean, a splash in the water. Now we know why you took the seasick pill and why you're wearing slicks, because you'd have been sopping wet without it. But it was a great trip back into there. And then the other part was great was we were able to go to the Penfold Winery. We had visited my cousin in Dublin, and that night the Italian waiter, he's brand new to Ireland. He just arrived the day before. So anyway, one of the wines he recommended was this Penfold, so we got it, and it was really, really good. And so I said, we got to get some more of that. So we did. When we came home, we ordered some more. And so when we were there, I said, we got to see the Penfold Winery. So we went to Adelaide, and then out of Adelaide, we had a limo, just us, pick us up, take us to this little town where the Penfold Winery is. And they took us out, and we got a private tour. And you go through, and the Penfold number so-and-so, it refers to the cave. The number refers to the cave at the Penfold Winery. So anyway, we went through that and had a Chinese gal was our tour guide. Did an excellent job. Then at the end, she brings us back to one of the caves they have there, or the barrels cave, I guess it is. And there, it's a big meeting room type place, and it's got it's a tasting room. So there's 4 glasses there, 4 for me, 4 for the guy, and so anyway, and people in the full window is glass, and people are wandering by. I wonder, I said, yeah, $300 and you can do it too. And then we went to the Outback and did 3 or 4 days in the Outback camping and seeing Uhuru, the big rock. And then we came back in to Adelaide and did some things there. And then we ended up, we flew up to...
You took the GAN.
Huh?
You took the GAN.
Oh, we took the GAN, yeah. Took the GAN, which is a train that goes from Adelaide to Darwin. It's south of Australia to the north. And that was expensive but nice, $5,000. So anyway, we did that, and then we ended up flying up to Douglas, and we did the Great Barrier Reef. Then we flew back to Sydney and did the last week in Sydney on the Intercontinental Hotel first class. So that was nice. They had a roof, and they'd have breakfast on the roof, and then they'd have cocktails and cocktail hour in the evening. So that was a good experience. Got to go through the sail place, the sails. Like it's an auditorium or whatever.
Opera House. Sydney Opera House.
Yeah. Anyway, I was going to climb the bridge, or the big steel bridge, but the day it was windy and lightning and stuff, and I says, "Ain't no way I'm going to climb a steel bridge in lightning." So I didn't do that. But we toured a lot of Australia, and then getting home, she couldn't get us a Sydney to Texas or Sydney to LA, so we went Air Qantas from
Brisbane.
From Sydney to Brisbane, changed to Hawaiian Air in Brisbane and flew from there to Honolulu, then changed to Air Alaska and flew from Honolulu back to San Diego. So that was a biggie. And the other one, I guess, would be next is Turkey. Huh? Marianne and I were talking about starting to take trips after we moved to San Diego here. And because we retired in 93, so in 96, I think it was, we ended up said we wanted to start traveling and seeing things. And so we said, I wanted to see China before it went back to China, or Hong Kong, before it went back to China. And so we were going to do just Hong Kong. And we have a friend who's a flight attendant for United that flies the LA, San Francisco to the Far East, Japan, and China. She says, "Oh, you're going that far, you gotta see China." So we said, okay. So we booked everything, got everything to our local travel guy down there. And so we took off, and it was like, how many days? I think 13 days. Anyway, so we flew into Shanghai, and we did Shanghai, we did Sichuan, Wuxi, and then we went to Beijing and saw the Great Wall and the other stuff that's to see around there. And then Beijing, we went to Xi'an, and we got to see the terracotta warriors in Xi'an. And then we we're going to fly from Xi'an to
Wait.
Guilin because we wanted to see, they got these vertical rock formations that are beautiful. You see pictures of them all the time. And so we were going to go there, but as there's a storm there, so we took off from Beijing, and it was a Russian Tu-54, Tu-154, that's it. And I'd heard stories about them. And so anyway, we couldn't go to there, so we had to go divert to Changsha, where Mao Zedong was born. And so we landed there, and then that was an experience living locally. So we did that, and then coming back out, I bumped into this guy, an American. He was the Boeing rep for Southeast Asia Airlines, or China Airlines. And he said, "What'd you come in on?" And I said, "That thing right there." He says, "Oh, you mean the flying tank?" I said, "Yeah, I guess." So he said, "Yeah, they're what they normally do. They're kind of underpowered, and so they treat it just like a propeller-driven. When they taxi out, set the brakes, run the engines up really good, and then just let go of the brakes, and they got the power going down. Then they go and they go and they go and they go. And you wonder when the heck they're going to lift off, and way down the runway they finally start to rotate a little bit, and then they took forever to climb up to any altitude of a. So I said, "Yeah, that's what we flew in on." And so he said, "Yeah." And so when we went to get on, I looked at the tires. There was no rubber left on the tires at all. And so I thought, oh, wow. So we did. We got to Guilin and spent time there and cruised the Lee River or whatever it is there. And then we flew from there to Hong Kong on a 737, a decent flight, American airline made. And we spent about 4 days in Hong Kong, and then we flew from Hong Kong back to San Francisco and then down to LA. And then other trips, we'd seen Rick Steves. He's a travel agent guy out of Edmonds, Washington. And he started doing trips to Europe. And he started Europe through the back door was what he called his trips, because he used to do it just in a VW van type. And so he started that. And now he's up. He runs thousands of people through Europe and elsewhere. So we took a trip with him, which was the best of Europe, which was 21 days. And we started in just west of Amsterdam. Haarlem, Netherlands. Then we did the Rijksmuseum and all that stuff, and then we went from there to a place, moved into Germany. And then from Germany we went down to Italy, spent time in a couple of days in Venice. Then we went to Florence, and then we went to Rome to did a couple, ended up in Paris, so that was 21 days. And then we did the best of Turkey. That was about 18 days. Start out in Istanbul and end up in Kuşadası, and then catch from there, that was the Rick Steves portion. Then from there, we went on our own, and we had this other couple. We'd come back from one of our Rick Steves tours, and I was telling this friend of ours in the travel club Bob and Sue Eldridge, and Bob wanted to go. He wanted to go on that. And I said, Bob, you're a cruiser. You've been on over 100 cruises. And on this one, you got to carry your own bags and do all that stuff. And they don't have elevators, and most of the time you're climbing stairs. Oh, no, we wanted to go. So they went with us. So when we came out of Kushadashi, we went across to Patmos. And we waited there all day, I'm sure, playing so you shop and spend money. And then we got on a boat that took us to a central island, and then the next morning we went to Santorini. I think we spent 4 days at each place. And then we ended up on from Santorini, we went to Mykonos to Athens. Then they had to leave to go home, so we flew back to London with them and got them transferred over. And then we flew back to Nice, and we're going to visit her best friend in high school is married to a famous artist. And so we were going to stay with them 4 days. So we flew there and did that. Then we ended up from there, we took the train up to visit our friends in Tours, France. And then we went from Tours. That's when we saw the beaches. Omaha, Utah, the two British and Canadian ones. And then we went from there to Brussels, visited my cousin who was, he's from Liechtenstein, and he's in the Liechtenstein foreign delegation. So they were stationed in Brussels, so we went there and stayed with them and visited places. Then we went back flew to Ireland and spent about 10 days touring Ireland and finally came back to the U.S. That was interesting because that whole tour was 2.5 months of Europe, about 18 days with Rick Steves. Then we went off on our own. So we got to see an awful lot. But it was interesting because I had a whole bunch of Delta frequent flyer miles, and I was trying to get to Istanbul. And so anyway, I found out, Flight 72 out of New York on Delta flies nonstop from JFK to Istanbul. So we got that. Then we had to get from here to San Diego to New York. And years ago, Delta merged with Western Airlines. And Western had a hub in Salt Lake City. And Delta did everything they could to route people through the Salt Lake hub to keep it working and going. So anyway, we were going to have to fly from here to San Diego to Salt Lake City, get off there, change planes, fly from Salt Lake City to JFK, get off and get on our Istanbul flight. And so anyway, I wanted to find out how far out I could make reservations. So I called Delta and they said 6 months. And I said, what date is that from the date here back? They said, gave me a date. They said, call in that day. So I called in that day at 8 o'clock, and I got this gal, and you could hear her. I told her what I wanted, and you could hear her. That's full. That's full. She went through. She worked her way back 2 weeks from the date that we wanted to get to Istanbul. And I thought, well, if that's the only seats we can get, frequent flyer, I will just mess around in Istanbul for 2 weeks. So I booked it, and a while later, I forget, a couple months later, I get this call from Delta. And they said, we've had some changes in your flight itinerary. I said, okay, what are they? Well, she said, going from San Diego, you're going to go 767. It goes from here to Phoenix, Phoenix to New York, JFK. And then coming back, we were going to be coming out of Dublin to like New York, and then the reverse western again, New York to Salt Lake. So anyway, one of the flights that I couldn't get before because it was full up was the Atlanta to San Diego section. And so they said, the next one is, I said, gee, that was just what I originally wanted. Well, what had happened, 9/11? And they changed everything. They canceled the flight that I was going to go on to New York and everything. So anyway, we made it home, and it only had one, it wasn't a mishap, one delay. When we were trying to get out of Atlanta, there was lightning in the area, so they wouldn't let the ground people get out to load the planes and all. So anyway, we did that one, and I can't think of any more. Oh, we've been to Ireland probably 6, 7 times. Because when I was working at GTE, they sent me to Birmingham, England to work our stand there with our sales, and pitch and switching equipment and all that kind of stuff. So I went there and worked for a week, 5 days, I think it was. And my dad had passed away just before that, like whatever it was. And I stopped by his sister, my aunt's place in Omaha, and got a lot of information out of her on where the family was from and all that in Ireland. So I got that and took a week's holiday after I did my work in Birmingham. Went back to Dublin and stayed in Dublin, went down the south route and came back up, and I pulled in our Dromore West, County Sligo, which is a town where my family's from. And I went in this grocery store on the north side of that, because it's just a Y in the road. There's one road in and then 2 lanes go out this way. And it was on the north side of that, and I said, tell me, there any Culkins still be living around here? She says, why you be asking? And I explained my grandfather immigrated, and she says, well, I don't know anything, but she says, the people, go to that store across the road, they might know something. Battles was the name of the store. And so I went over there, and it was packed with people, women mainly in the front. And I'd see a man and his wife come in, and she'd go to shop, and he'd open the sliding door and step into the back, and the door goes, and that's the pub. So anyway, they were very busy, so it was 5 or 10 minutes before I was able to get a hold of the gal and talk to her. And I said, are there any Culkins still be living around here? She said, why do you be asking? And I told her about my grandfather, and she says, are you related to the Flynns? And I said, yes, I know. I explained it, but are you related to the Devandes? Yeah, that's my great-grandmother. Nah. Anyway, went through, and finally at the end she says, well, it's nice to meet you, Lewis. I'm your cousin. So that got me started. And they originally said, when I told them my name was Lewis, they said, no, there's already a Lewis Culkin. I said, I know, Louis, and he's this, and I was able, and so anyway, he had not paid that. His mom had died. He'd lived there a couple of years because the youngest sons in Ireland take care of the mother. And so she died. He lived in the house 2 years. Then he went to London. And this was like probably 6, 7 years, 62 to like whatever it was. And the word was out that I was a revenuer back to nail him for back taxes on the property. But then once they found out, no, I'm a relative, he comes out of the woodwork, and all of them come out, and we all start drink. And so anyway, Lewis took me all over town meeting relatives. I met Sheila Foy Boland, because later I got into genealogy pretty heavy, and she had a memory you wouldn't believe. You'd give her a name, and she wouldn't know. And you'd say the name and then the town. Oh, now she knows. Off she goes. She knows how many kids they had, their names, when they were born, when they died, how many kids they had. I mean, she could just go through everything. But anyway, that was one trip. And then Dee Dee and her mother were going to go over to Ireland. And Dee Dee, when I got back, I couldn't do work on genealogy because I was working too much. And so I gave my genealogy stick charts, I call them, which is paper, and you got who this is, and then who they married, who they had kids, kids, marriages, and all that. So I put that down, and they were going to go to Ireland. She couldn't figure out my page connectors because I had several pages of info. And so I said, well, why don't you come down and I'll spend time with you and explain all the connectivity and all that and so forth. So she did, and I ran a copy of the original papers. And so anyway, they came down and I got that, and that got me back into genealogy. So that started me off on the serious genealogy, where that was 99. And I now have genealogy info on 6,000 Culkins, 7,000 Petersons, and all the Peterson connectivity, which is 1,000. I have something like 30-some thousand people in my database relative to all of my relatives and family. But then I kind of slacked off. I got most of that done. There's nothing more to find. But I did find several interesting facts getting back into the genealogy and going deeper and deeper and further back. I worked back through my mother's side. Most of it's through my mother's side. And they're Stuarts. So I'm related to the royal family of England. And also I worked that back from there back to Robert the Bruce. Robert the Bruce and Wallace, they were the two people fighting England and the king. And there's two statues of them at the Edinburgh church or castle. On the left is Robert the Bruce, and on the right is the Wallace. And Robert the Bruce is my 19th great-grandfather. So I was able to work that up. And his daughter, he had a daughter, and she married a Stuart, and that brought the king and all of that stuff into the Stuart side of the family. And then later on, Mary, Queen of Scots, did a lot of traveling in France. Well, there's not it used to be S-T-W-A-R-T, and there's no W in the French language. So they changed it to S-T-U-A-R-T, which is the name that went with the royal family. And I'm in the Stuart line on this side of family. So I am related back up through Mary, Queen of Scots, to the royal side of the family. I think the son, one of the sons, both sons of the current king, they're like a 22nd cousin. But it's way back. But nonetheless, if you gave a DNA test to one of those and me, they would find a connection. And then the other thing, I kept running in genealogy. I the Flanagan family. And Flanagan, and I kept saying, where in the hell is Flanagan coming from? So I kept procrastinating, and finally I said one day, I'm going to go find out about Flanagan. So I did. And so what I end up finding out, and the family said my grandfather and Flanagan were friends because they were from the same general area in Ireland. Father Flanagan. And so anyway, I ended up chasing that down. I've got several side stories that come in. That the first one is every morning before work, Father Flanagan, my grandfather, and this guy named Gordon would meet to have coffee for breakfast and stuff before they went off on their daily work. And one morning, Father Flanagan is talking about how he'd like to find another avocation other than just a parish priest, to which my grandfather replies, why don't you start a home for boys? So the original idea for Boys Town came from my grandfather, Patrick Joseph Culkin. And then the relationship between the Culkins, the Begleys, and Flanagan is I started running that down. And it ends up that my grandfather, Patrick Joseph Culkin, and my grandmother, Jane Begley, they were Father Flanagan's aunt and uncle. And so that makes my dad first cousin with Father Flanagan, and me, I'm first cousin once removed. So I'm related to Father Flanagan through marriage, but I'm still related. Oh yeah, in Boys Town, my dad's brother was Ren Leo Culkin, and he was a stamp collector. He used to work at the Omaha Bee, and letters that come into the Bee with stamps on them. He'd cut the stamps off, soak them, and do all the papers, And so he started his own stamp company. And then World War II came, and he ended up a fireman at the Martin Bomber plant in Omaha. And eventually he worked his way around where he became the stamp and coin curator at Boys Town, Nebraska. And one of the things he did was he put together a globe. I mean, it's probably that big, that huge. And he stamps all over, different world. The African stamps got African, Egypt this. So anyway, that was the start of that. Oh, yeah, and my Uncle Ren, who was a stamp and coin curator at Boys Town, when my mother was pregnant, he started a first day cover collection for me, who I'm not even in the world yet. And what the first day covers is they're a regular envelope, but it's the issue of the stamp. It's a new stamp, and there's an engraved envelope, and it's from the city where the stamp was representing, and all that, and they put together. And then, so he subscribed to that, and I stopped collecting about 85, 86, somewhere in the late 80s. But I had every first day cover stamp, which is every stamp in the U.S. since 1936 through 1980 something. And so I stopped collecting. I wasn't into it anymore. So we had all these volumes of books in there with first day covers in them. And so what we did was we decided to donate them to Boys Town in my grandfather's name. So we had to go through we had to get the whole collection evaluated and validate, all kinds of stuff. So they did that, and I don't know, I think, what was it? I don't know how much it was. It was like 10,000, 12,000, 10, 12,000 was the evaluation. So we donated to the Boys Town and were able to take a tax deduct. Regarding my career, I started, when I first came to California, I started at Douglas Aircraft. And as I previously covered, I couldn't see that was going to work out. So I ended up looking for a job, and I saw linemen and installers in the Evening Outrage or Evening Outlook in Santa Monica. And so I went and applied, and I ended up getting the job as an engineering assistant. And I worked there until, that was February. And about 4 months later, the draft hit. So I went and I covered that previously. And when I came back out of the Air Force, because I had a leave of absence, so I got credit for all the 4 years I was gone in the Air Force and all that stuff. And so I started as an engineering assistant in Santa Monica, and then I got promoted to management, went to the southern area in Downey, and then I got promoted again back to Santa Monica. Then I got promoted again and was in Santa Monica. Then I got promoted again and was sent to Tampa, Florida to work on the data processing end of the business. And then from there I was promoted to GTE headquarters in New York City. So that's when we lived in Connecticut, and I commuted for 2 years into New York City on the train. Me and the man in the gray flannel suit. Anyway, I had a lot of responsibilities. First of all, the first data processing system GTED's put out was the one I worked on, the traffic data system. And then we took it out and implemented it in the operating companies, which were 18 or 19 of them. Then I was promoted and went to New York, and there I had responsibility for all of the electronic. I worked my way up. I got promoted again, and I had responsibility for all of the electronic switching development and associated software. And I ended up the switching services manager, which was responsible for all 19 operating companies and all of the development and implementation of all that stuff. Then I came back to California because I wanted to get back to California. And the only way you got back was to take a downgrade, because nobody wanted to take you, because you'd be replacing somebody out there that'd get promoted. So I agreed. I used to have meetings periodically with my counterparts from all the operating companies. And I was having one in Dallas, and I was sitting at the bar, and Chuck McWilliams from California was sitting there, and we got chatting. And I said, could you do me a favor? And he said, sure. I said, keep on the lookout for a job, because I'm wanting to get back to California. He says, oh, I didn't know that. And so I said, yeah, if you would, I'd appreciate it. He said, okay, will do. So next thing, 2 weeks later, I get a call from Dick Hartman, who was my old boss when I worked in a California company. And it was the job that I had when I worked for him that he would be available. And he said, well, I said, so, and we hung up, and Hartman called my boss, because I went in and told my boss. He says, Jesus, I knew you wanted to get out of here, but I didn't want to get out of here that bad. I said, well, I told you, because I don't want to run behind my boss. So anyway, he said, well, how soon is this going to happen? And Hartman said, well, it'll be a few weeks. I got to get rid of the guy that's in there. He's not doing the job. So we waited and waited. And finally, my boss, Denny Lehman, he ended up heading up a work group, we call them. And they were reviewing all of the organization and everything and getting rid of this and transferring that and rearranging the organization. Well, to do that, he borrowed people from the operating companies. And one of them was a director of personnel from the Pennsylvania company in Erie, Pennsylvania. And so anyway, when we finally got all set and I was ready to go to California, in the work group, Denny was just starting up, and I wasn't. It was going to be a few weeks or a month or so. But anyway, Denny came to me, my boss, and he said, "We can't get floor space for these guys. We can't get desks with chairs, phones, all of this stuff." That was at 8 o'clock in the morning. And he said, "Could you see what you could do?" And I said, "Okay, I'll look at that." So anyway, I had everything all in for him and secretaries and everything by noon. It took me 4 hours to organize and put that together. So then when we were getting ready to try and get me a job in California, they said, "Jesus, I was a level 10 and I was going to go to a level 7 to get this job." And so then he said, "Well, let me look around a bit." So anyway, little Bobby Hausman was that director from Pennsylvania. Well, he had been promoted in the meantime to vice president of personnel in California. And so Lehman called him up, and they agreed, and said, and Hausman says, "Is that guy that organized and got all the desks and floor space and everything for us?" And Lehman said, "Yeah." And he says, "We want him." So it was arranged. I went out, instead of going out as a 7, I went out as a 10. Instead of going out as a 10, I went out as an 8. So it took a 2-level downgrade instead of 3. So that worked out to that point. So I came back, and I was the service results manager for the service department, which is the largest group in the company. It's all the customer reps, the installer, repairman, and all that stuff. So anyway, we got that done, and I had the responsibility for that whole budget, which is several $1 million, probably 10 to 12. Anyhow, I ended up, my counterpart was a gal in customer service manager, and she got promoted to the north and was leaving that job as level 10. So anyway, I went to Herb Gasser, who's a friend of mine, but he's my boss too. And so anyway, I told him I'd like to get, and he says, "Okay, you got it." And so that was at 10 o'clock in the morning. Oh, I know what it was. He also said, when we started talking about me and that job, he says, "Well, you don't have it. You don't have the qualifications in that." So I thought about that all night, and I was so mad. I came in and I said, "Get in here, Gasser. I need to talk to you." So he came in, and I sat in, and I says, "All you guys remember is Louie from DNA. From old, anyhow." I says, "I've got more experience than you ever thought of." And I says, "Let me review it for you." So I went through my career. And at the end of that, you got the job. So anyway, the next morning he comes in and says, "You don't got the job." Because his boss had an MBO, management by objectives, to have more females in the higher ranks of the company. So here I am. I had a really good case, reverse discrimination, but that don't get you anywhere. And so anyway, it was just several months later that they transferred me to the Northern Area Service Manager's job, lateral, level 8 to a level 8. And I worked at that for a while. And I was working for Jim Blake, who was vice president of Northern Area, and he was really a tough guy. And we got along great. So, because when I came back and I said, "You going to go to work for Blake?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. Why?" "Oh, he's tough. I said, "I get along fine with him. Just never lie to him and do what he says to do," which I did. So one day Blake says, "I'm hungry. I could eat the north end out of a southbound skunk." So we went next door to the restaurant. We're eating. And this was like October 6th. And he said, "Oh, by the way, effective the 1st of the month, you're the new Santa Monica division manager." And I said, "Oh?" And I said, "Is there anything else?" And he says, "Yeah, there's a blank in street there." I said, "On that, I'll take the job." So anyway, they gave me the worst division in all of GTE and all of GTE period. Worse than the California company, certainly. So I was sent in there and I said, "Can you do me a favor now?" And he says, "Sure, what do you want?" He said, "The first thing you got to do is get rid of that dumb blanking secretary of yours." I said, "Okay, done. Can you do me a favor?" And I said, "I need to take Dwayne with me." "What time do you want to take him for?" And I explained, and he said, "Okay." So we sat there over breakfast trading, and by the end of the breakfast, I was going into Santa Monica with everybody that I needed and wanted to help straighten that place out. So anyway, I was sitting there, and one day the phone rings, and it's Dave Anderson, who's the president of the California company. He says, "Lou," I said, "Dave, how are you?" And he says, "Marilyn and I are supposed to host some of our customers at the Olympics, and we can't make it. We were wondering if you and Marianne could stand in for us." And so we did. So the '84 Olympics, Marianne and I got to go to all kinds of events and dinners and stuff like that. So that worked out. And then finally, I got it straightened out. I took Santa Monica from the worst division to the best division in the company. And so then they transferred me to GO, General Office, and I was General Plant Manager. I was there that for 3 months. And then we started up a new organization called Carrier Services. So I was named Director of Carrier Services. So I've gone all the way from that to a full director in the California company, which is next to the vice president. So anyway, I did that. I started and got that going, and I started with 3 people, and I ended up, when I left, I had, when at the peak I had about 800 people, because eventually they transferred Hawaii in to report to me and the Northwest Company to report to me. And then we started the downside. I had to go back, and we met with all directors and all downsizing and centralizing. So when I left, instead of 800 people, I had about 80 engineers who had to stay out locally because they designed circuits and stuff like that, and then see that it's implemented. So then got that done, started centralizing, consolidating, and so it was getting not to be fun anymore. So my boss said, I said, "I'm going to retire." And he says, "Well, I really like you to stay." I said, I appreciate that. But I said, it's getting to be not fun for me anymore." He says, "Okay, whatever you want." So, they transferred me to Texas, and I was working as a director of Carrier Services, director. And so anyway, I said, what I'll do is I'll go back to California, get all this consolidation and centralization done and downsize everything. And then as soon as a good retirement package comes along, I'll take it, and exit stage left. So I did. I went back and we got all the stuff done, and here comes a package for retirement. And I said, I'll take it. So Mary Ann was working there, not for me, but in the service area. And she wanted to retire, but she didn't have enough points. To retire, you had to have 78 points, I think, 78 or 72, one or the other, which include your age and your number of years of working employment. So it's when you reach 70, 72 or 78, whatever, I can't remember that. Then you could retire. Well, she was 2 points short of 72 or 78, and so anyway, she couldn't get, she had a dumbass boss. She couldn't get anything done with him. So anyway, one day his boss from Dallas was in, and he bumps into her, and she was telling, he says, I hear you want to retire. And she said, yeah, but you don't have enough points. He said, well, we take care of that. And so what they did is they kept her on working for one more year. Then she's only 1 point short. So they farm her out. And I mean farmed out, because you go to call Mary Ann Culkin, she didn't work here. Nothing. She was gone, so she had to go on my medical and my dental and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, she worked a year and got it, made it. And then, so she retired. She beat me out. I was going to retire around February, and she ended up going in February, and I went in May or June. And so we both left and took our package. We took lump sums, and she was lucky because she had not taken retirement. Once she was off work and everything at home, but she was still being carried on the payroll.
I was being paid.
Yeah, she was being paid. I don't know how, but she did. And so then she hit that, and she retired, and then I retired. And meantime, we built a big ranch house. Not the best move we ever made, but anyhow, we built a big ranch house out in Somas, California, out in the Groves. And we lived there 2 or 3 years, and then we retired and lived there another couple of years. And I said, we got to get out of here, because the payments on the house it was a huge house. It was like 4,400 square feet. I said, we got to get out of here. It's too expensive living here. So we started looking around, traveling around. We always liked the San Diego area, because we'd come down here for meetings when we were working at the company and so forth. And so we started traveling and visiting various areas in San Diego. And so anyway, we had this couple that were friends of ours we had motorhomes, and we had a motorhome group club, and they lived down here, so we came down and visited with them. They said, go north of the 8. And so we did, and we ended up looking, and finally we had an apartment in Rancho Bernardo. And here we ended up looking and found up here, we bought up here. So we've been here for 28 years. So well, it was genealogy, but I've dropped off on that now too. So I really don't have much to do.
It was traveling that we did.
Yeah, travel. Yeah, we did a lot of traveling. I think our favorite place, Istanbul. Yeah. Yeah, Istanbul, Turkey.
What was it about Istanbul and Turkey that?
But it's just the atmosphere and the housing, and in Istanbul you got the straits there,
Sea of Marmara.
Sea of Marmara, you know. And I had been stationed in Turkey, so I knew quite a bit about the Turks and could speak some of the language because we were remote isolated tour. Huh?
The people were wonderful.
Yeah, nice,
All of
good.
our carpets are from
Yeah.
Turkey.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I wasn't aware they're so nice.
So that was, I think, our favorite place. And
Paris is
Paris runs right up there too. Because usually when we went to Europe, and we've been there, I don't know, 10 times, 12 times, we usually end up in Paris and spend the last week in Paris and then fly home from there. Not much. It was just day in, day out. Very, very rigid, very structured, of course.
Well, you went to military school.
But when I went to military school,
No,
No, just in general, like, did you enjoy all that structure?
yeah, I didn't really have any problems with it. The reason I made it through Wentworth probably is because I played sports, so we were gone, you know, traveling ball games, different places. Daily duties. Well, let's see. I could start with Trabzon. That was my first moving out into the world of the Air Force. We monitored all the Soviet radars, and and also we monitored the Soviet missile launchers. Proudest moment in my life. I think when we straightened out Santa Monica Division, you know, taking on the worst of the worst and ending up the best of the best. I think that's my biggest achievement in my career. Well, as a friendly, honest, open person,
this are the stick charts that I used when I first started genealogy. And where I got these was when I went to Ireland in 78, I think it was. And I got a whole bunch of information from a cousin, Sheila Foy Boland, in our old hometown of Drumore West, County Sligo. And so I had stick chart. I had when I was over there, I wrote everything down, and I had like 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 pages, and I had taken them down so fast because I was trying to keep up with Sheila as she was telling who's who in the family. And so when I got back, I think I covered in the other part of the story that I gave to my daughter Dee because I didn't have time to do the work. And then she and her mother were going to Ireland, and she called me up and said she couldn't make out my connector page, the page connectors. So I said, why don't you come down? And we went over, and I got a copy of that. And so since I didn't have any genealogy program, I went from that, and I cleaned them all up and kept them. So now I have, like this is the Peterson family, my mother's family. And so I got the issue and the date, and this is where it's from and the contact point. And then what I do is I go to, this is distribution of the report that I sent out. And then here's the report. I cleaned it up, and what you do is I got notes that go to each one. So for example, I'll take one where I got on note 65 is where John Peterson. So I go back here. And here, note 65, source, the source information, where I got the information from. This is Tim Foley from Iowa City, Iowa. June 2010 email. Foley, the genealogist at mac.com. So all of the data in here, all these people, where I get sources, I source them. So you know where the information came from. Well, here's my great-grandfather. Oh, let's say that, right? My great-great-grandfather, Johan Peterson, and he was born about 1800 in Denmark, and he died in 1800 in Denmark. And his wife was Julia Kastrup, my great-great-grandmother. She was born 26 December 1803, and I don't have a death date for her, but I collected other information after I got on a computer program, and I now had found her date. So, but I haven't updated these since I went onto the computer and converted. So, and this. So, page connectors, for example, this is page 1. But anyway, it's an example of what's there. So this is page 1, and then you go to page 1A.
And who are all of those?
So those are all the children of Johan Peterson and Julia Kastrup. So that's the page connector. It says from 1A, from 1. So this is a page connector of page 1's children. And then if you go over here to 1A, I'm just going to tell you here that this is from page 1A. So there wasn't enough room on the other page, so I continued onto this page. This is a continuation of 1A coming in here, and these are all the children of Johan and Julia Kastrup. So between page 1 here, this one, and then this is the family and their children. Not enough room down here, so I page connector it over here to 1A, and then come up to the top, says from page 1, 1A, and here's the additional children. And then here, this is their children. You go to page, I'll start here, page 2. Is page 2. Here's page 2. And then here's Dora Peterson and Sidious Thompson. And their birth, all the information, for example, here, because it's my direct relative, I have their birthday, 26 March 1835, in Saby, Jutland, Denmark. She died 10 February 1913 in Marshalltown, Iowa. And she's buried 12 February 1913, Riverside Cemetery, Marshalltown, Iowa. She was married in Denmark, and 1867.
How many years did you go back that you found information?
Well, in some of the family, I'm back into the 1300s. And one of the discoveries I made when I was searching and looking was on my mother's side, which is at Peterson. Going back through in history from this going backwards, we hit the Stewarts, Stewart, and Mary, Queen of Scots, spent a lot of time in France, and the French alphabet did not have a W, so she substituted UA, so it's Stewart is the true name from way back. And since she changed it to Stewart, Stuart, because the French alphabet didn't have a W. And so that side of the Stewart family goes down to the King of England. So I'm related to the King of England through that line. And then going back a little further, back from Mary, Queen of Scots, whom I'm related to, certainly in that line. I go back and it ends up where the Stewart came in was Robert the Bruce.
Robert.
He had a sister who married a Stewart, so that's where my Stewart family comes into that line. But I am connected out to the Stewart family, Stuart, through Mary, Queen of Scots.
How many generations does that go back to the 1300s? How many generations do you think that is?
Well, Robert the Bruce is my 19th great-grandfather. And he has in Edinburgh, Scotland, there's 2 statues in front of the church. The one on the left is Robert the Bruce, and the one on the right is, help me out.
William Wallace?
Yeah, William Wallace. So that was the time, and there's a movie was made.
Yeah, Braveheart.
Braveheart.
Yeah.
And Robert the Bruce was in some of that, but most of it was about the other guy.
William Wallace. Yeah.
William Wallace, yeah. And so anyway, but I go back further than that. I go back to like 300 something. We had gone on a trip to Spain. She had to come back to go to work, and I continued on to Sligo town, because they were having a genealogy conference there. And at that conference, I had taken the Culkin family, the stick charts with me. And there's a professor that teaches at Trinity College in Dublin, and he's in the genealogy stuff at the college. And when he saw that, and he says, "You have all of that?" I said, "Yes, I do. Some 6,000 Culkins." And he said, "You need to get that to the university, to Trinity College. You get that in their archives, all the work you've done on, and all." So, anyway, I've never done that, but
How many books and pages do you have, you think?
let's see. I got I think I got 16 books. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So I got 16 books. And the furthest I go back is at Robert the Bruce.
If you had to ballpark how many relatives you found and made note of, what do you think that number would be?
45,000.
45,000?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it goes back. My dad passed away in 1978, and he lived in Sheridan, Montana. He was retired there, and so when I was interested in seeing where I came from in Ireland. And this is for my first trip. I'm preparing to go, and so when I got out all the information I could from my dad, what he knew about the family in Ireland, and he had a sister, my aunt, in Omaha, Nebraska, and I was going back because I lived in Connecticut then. And I was driving his car. I flew up there and I took his Chevy station wagon, loaded up with what I wanted to keep out of the house. And then they were going to sell the house and auction everything off. So anyway, I stopped at my Aunt Adeline Tanner. And I got from her as much information as I could, just copied what she told me and all the information she had. And then the company sent me to Birmingham, England to work in marketing and sales stuff for telephone equipment. And anyway, I worked there a week, 5 days on in Birmingham. And then I went to Dublin and stayed in Dublin. And then I drove down to see the south of Ireland and came up to County Sligo. And so the story goes, I got there and it's just a little crossroads. One goes this way, one goes to the ocean this way. And so there was a grocery store on the north side of the street. So I walked in, and I'd been in Ireland now for 4 or 5 days, so I developed my brogue. I probably thought was my brogue. And I walked in, and I said, "Tell me, there any Culkins still be living around here?" And the lady says, "Why you be asking?" And I told the story of how my grandfather migrated in 1895 from, and he'd run away from home. And anyway, she said, "Well, I don't know." She says, "You might go across the street, Battles." She says, "They might know something over there." Then where this store on the north side, there's hardly any, 1 or 2 people in there. You go over the south side, and it's just full of women in the grocery store. And I figured that there's this sliding door at the back. And I figured the pub must be in the back there, because the men, they come in husband and wives. The wives stay out front and shop at the grocery store. And the men would go to the back, push the door aside. All the men were back in the pub. So that ended up that, while I was there, it was April 8th of 78, I think. Anyway, the gal was so busy at the counter, I had to wait about 5-10 minutes before she had time to talk to me. So same thing. I said, "Is any Culkins still be living around here?" And she says, "Why you be asking?" That must be the way they respond to questions or whatever. I said, "Well, my grandfather went to America in 1895. And she said, "Well, are you related to the Flynns?" And I said, "Yes." And I explained as much as I could on the Flynns. And she says, "Are you related to the Devannies?" I said, "Yes, my great-grandmother is Sarah Devanny." And I gave as much as I could information on that. And then finally she said, "Well, Lewis," and the first thing was there was a L-O-U-I-S, she said. And I said, "Well, I'm Lewis also, L-E-W-I-S. She says, "Oh." So anyway, after all the questioning, she finally says, "It's nice to meet you, Lewis. I'm your cousin." So with that, the other Lewis came out. It seemed that he had not, the tradition in Ireland is the youngest son stays home to take care of the mother. And when she passed in 1862, I think it was, he stayed on there for another 4 years. And in 1866...
1960.
Oh, yeah, 1966. Yeah. And then he moved to London. He was a lorry driver, truck driver in London. And then he happened to be home the same weekend. And because he hadn't paid taxes from 1962 to 78 or whatever it was, they thought I was a revenue from Dublin there to catch him for back taxes. Well, we found out I was a relative. Geez, everybody come on, here comes Lewis out. They were hiding him in the back. So, and he took us around all the different relatives. And I met them, the Flynns and the Devaney's and the Culkins and all of them. And one of them was Sheila Foy Boland. We stopped at. And she's the one who's probably responsible for, I'd say, 90%, 80 to 90% of this information.
Oh, wow.
She was an amazing woman. You'd give her a name, and she'd say, no, it doesn't mean anything, but you give her a name and a location, and she'd just take off.
Wow.
She'd say, yes, that was so-and-so. He married this so-and-so. They had these kids. They were born, and she gave the dates they were born off the top of her head. And so anyway, I got as much as I could get, rapidly writing. And then Dee Dee came down to go to Ireland, and I explained the page connectors and all that stuff. So but when she left, I kept the copy, and I cleaned them up, put them on disc. You couldn't read my writing or nothing. It's a mess, because I've been writing as fast as she was saying stuff, And so anyway, that I cleaned those up to this. Then I got started. I had to go back to Ireland. So we've been back probably 7 times. Then she does a drive-by shooting for me in cemeteries. Because I had all the cemetery stuff there, because all the information where my great-grandparents are buried, and on my dad's mother's side, he had let's see, he had Sarah Devaney was my great-grandmother. And her father was John Devaney. And he lived to be 103 years old. And he was the sheriff of Drumore West. So, and part of that running in things like I don't know if I explained in the previous time we talked. Anyway, another part of that same storyline was my grandfather was Patrick Joseph Culkin, and he left in 1895, and he landed in Philadelphia, and then he had an uncle, Patrick Culkin, in Rockford, Illinois. So he migrated to Illinois, and then he had another uncle, Patrick's brother, John Culkin. He was they were in clothing sales in Ireland, so they just brought that over here with them when they came. And Uncle John had a men's clothing store in Carthage, Illinois. And so Grandpa, Patrick Joseph Culkin, went to John's house. I think he stayed with Patrick the first year or two, and then he went back to Ireland. And then he came back, and we came back. He went to Uncle John's. And then from there, John Flynn had been the first one to come over within the family. And he went home or he went through there and ended up in Omaha. Well, I kept finding the Flanagan kept appearing. And I said, where's Flanagan? And I kept putting it on. Finally I said, darn it, I'm going to write it down and find out who these Flanagans are. And the Begley tree, my grandmother, is where they appeared. And so, anyway, it ends up that Father Flanagan and Patrick Joseph Culkin and a man named Gordon. And I got this from my cousin, who got it from Gordon. This every morning, the three of them, Father Flanagan and Gordon and my grandfather, would stop for coffee before they go about their daily duties. And Father Flanagan was talking about finding another avocation other than just a parish priest. With my grandfather responded, why don't you start a home for boys? So I don't know if you know about Boys Town, Nebraska, but it's a famous city now of orphan children and so forth and abandoned and that kind. So the idea to start Boys Town was my grandfather's. And so, and later I ran it down and got my connectivity to him. And my dad was Father Flanagan's first cousin. And I'm first cousin once removed. So I'm related to the founder of Boys Town, Nebraska. And did they treat me good when we visited there? When they found out that I was a relative of Father Flanagan.
you'll see. Down to Canahan Alley. And I've been walking all alone for way too long. Will you remember me? Remember me when I'm gone. Coming back, you'll see. Down to Canahan Alley. Rolling green hills and the bright shining sun. No need to hide, no need to run. Can't wait to feel that sweet Irish rain. Let it wash away your pain. That's heaven to me. A place called Canahan Alley. Oh, that's heaven to me.